He gives China great credit for ripping Americans off. That framing, China as a tough negotiating opponent, not a systemic threat, is the key to understanding everything that comes next. Now let's go deeper and talk about the investments, right? We're talking about the possibility of Chinese companies building factories and industrial infrastructure inside the United States itself. Now, to some people, this sounds like economic suicide, but to others, this actually sounds smart. And this is where the conversation gets interesting because there are legitimate arguments on both sides. On one side, supporters would argue, wait a minute, isn't this exactly what America wants? For years, politicians have been promising more factories, more manufacturing jobs, lower prices, industrial revival, and rebuilding America's production base. So if Chinese companies come into America and build factories that hire American workers, some people will say, what exactly is the problem? Especially at a time when inflation is hurting consumers and manufacturing costs remain high. And honestly, that argument is not completely irrational. If China brings capital, factories, jobs, and infrastructure investment, some communities in America could absolutely benefit in the short term. But then comes the other side of the argument. And this is where the national security concerns begin. Critics are saying, hold on. You spent years warning us that China was America's greatest strategic threat. So how do you now turn around and potentially allow Chinese companies to become deeply embedded inside critical sectors of the US economy? Because this is no longer just about cheap product. This is about supply chains, data, technology, industrial dependence, and strategic leverage. And that's why this debate is becoming so explosive. Because underneath all of this is a much bigger question. Can the world's two largest superpowers truly compete against each other while also being economically dependent on each other at the same time? And my people, that question doesn't just affect America and China. It affects the entire global economy. Because if this deal happens, it could reshape global manufacturing, trade alliances, investment flows, energy markets, supply chains, and even Africa's position in the world economy. And that's where this story starts becoming much bigger than Trump himself.